Okay, welcome everybody to another EJIS Conversations. My name is Jason Ralph and I am co-editor of the journal, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Christoph Harig, Nicole, Jenne and Chiara Ruffa, who are the guest editors of our very first special issue, the very first special issue for the European Journal of International Security. And this issue addresses military role conceptions, operational experiences, and their influence on civil-military relations. And it brings together 7 papers from a diverse array of authors. And it's a fantastic first issue for the journal, and we're really pleased. So let me start by congratulating our guest editors and thanking them for fantastic contribution. And maybe I could start the conversation by asking you what motivated the project and the special issue as a whole.
Yeah, what motivated the project is basically we all three come from different perspectives on civil-military relations, and it actually started out over dinner at a conference where there were lots of military sociologists around, and lots of themes of the conference circled around a different understanding of military roles in society than you typically find in civil-military relations scholarship. So we thought we'd blend those two strands of research where we all three more or less feel situated in, and thought we might add a different perspective on the usual civil-military relations scholarship that typically addresses institutional questions of the relationship between politicians and the military, and in some cases society as well. But as a whole, and I'm simplifying here, I admit, it's a rather institutionalist scholarship that typically assumes that things are going well as soon or as long as civilians decide whether or what the military is supposed to do. And we wanted to understand, and we wanted to bring together a different group of scholars who shed light on how that actually works out in practice. What happens when politicians give soldiers certain tasks, how soldiers or the military leaders accept those missions or not, what motivates them to push back perhaps against those demands by democratic governments. So it's not about reinventing the wheel of civil-military relations scholarship, it's rather adding new perspectives on topics that are assumed to be going well in civil-military relations, but we wanted to understand certain mechanisms that remain under research.
Yeah, so an organizing theme, I guess, of the special issue that runs through the papers are these two concepts of operational experience and role conceptions, and what I liked in particular was how these were used to look at perhaps non-traditional forms of operational experiences and how they interacted. So maybe one of you can elaborate on these concepts and the role they play in the special issue.
So we started the special issue out asking the contributors to take any operational experiences of the armed forces. So that is what Christoph said, what they really do on a daily basis, the practical focus. All armed forces have the mission to defend the homeland, obviously, but there are a few that are actually defending the homeland on a daily basis, right? The majority of militaries does a lot of other things. And I'm not sure whether it's the best plan for a special issue or not, but it was how ours proceeded. We started out with that question, look at operational experiences and their effects on civil-military relations. And it's important to understand that for civil-military relations is not a static relation between the military leadership and the political leadership, but we look at it as an equilibrium between the armed forces political authorities and society as a whole, something that is constructed and reconstructed on an everyday basis. And what emerged as we were working together with the different contributors, we discussed our work and had many conversations about it, was that idea of role conceptions, because we figured out that how operational experiences affect civil military relations depends on a lot of things, but crucially on role conceptions. And I guess we can think of just 5 different people and everyday experience. Every one of these 5 persons will interpret a simple thing very differently, because we come from different backgrounds, because we've experienced the same thing before or not, because we have certain ideas about our society, how it is and how it should work, right? And with the military, it's the same thing. A military that experiences defeat in war and has experienced defeat in war 15 times before that, will experiences that one defeat in war differently than another military that is more used to success in war, or than a military that has never fought a war before, or in a long time hasn't fought a war. And these experiences, these prior experiences, culture, the composition of the military, all that influences role conceptions. How does the military think of its proper purpose and the purpose of force in international politics? So it's sort of a filter that mediates how operational experiences influence civil military relations.
Yeah, so on that point about the equilibrium that you mentioned, I mean, some of the papers, I think here of Yagil Levy's paper, looking at Israel Defense Force and coronavirus and how the pandemic might have changed that equilibrium. Also, Anit Mukherjee's paper on how combat casualties in non-traditional operations have affected that equilibrium in Indian civil military relations. And you use the phrase construction and reconstruction. You talk about a circular process, don't you?
I mean, I can jump in. I think you sort of one of the contributions that we tried to make with this special issue is really to sort of create this space and start theorizing in this gray zone, right, that is created between those that study how the military functions, military sociologists, and what kind of effect it has on civil military relations. Thus far, I mean, a wealth of literature in civil military relations has been relatively static. In sort of, there is a plethora of theories about what determines a certain equilibrium. But what we are really interested in studying is under what condition does this equilibrium change? And what I think Yagil Levy's paper and also Anit Mukherjee's paper show is that things can change. And the COVID pandemic has really shown us how it's easy. The military is an easy tool to refer to pull in, to ask services to, because it has a very special expertise that is readily available. But we still do not know what kind of consequences this may lead to. And the effort with this special issue is really to think about the mechanisms and logic that may connect, on the one hand, how the military functions, and the sort of a more dynamic understanding of civil military relations.
Yeah. I'm sure that, sorry, yes, go ahead, Nicole.
I'll jump in on that. The paper by Nina Villen and Lisa Strömbom also makes a point about that. They examine the major roles of the militaries in democratic developed societies, and argue that in recent times, in the post-Cold War period, there have been more and more roles and sub-roles, and these roles have been very visible to populations. So they argue the equilibrium, the civil-military relations equilibrium, is affected in a way that it actually legitimizes the greater role of the military within society, within the state, and in that sense brought the military and society closer together. And they don't say it's a danger to democracy, but they do say we need to be cautious. Calling in the military to assume all sorts of tasks can have long-term effects that we need to pay attention to.
And if I may jump in on this, I think sort of this is also one of the reasons why we adopted, we asked to have a very diverse set of contributions, right? So Vilen and Strömbom provide a very conceptual contribution where they unpack tasks and functions and mandates, and that really allowed us to then lay the ground and pave the way for the rest of the contributions that are a bit more empirical. And as Nicole just said, right, so we don't assume that the consequences of operational experiences on civil-military relations will necessarily be nefastus, very negative, but we need to have the tools, the conceptual tools to understand these logics. And this is also why we chose role conceptions as an interesting and kind of fruitful analytical tools, because other alternative concepts that we also discussed in the introduction are, say, military professionalism or military cultures, but they tend to become easily quite slippery and maybe overstretched. But while this role conception had this charm and had this advantage of being relatively focused and narrow, so that we could really sort of trace it empirically in a relatively precise way to start paving the way and sort of filling this gap between these two sides of these two literatures, these two debates, the operational experiences and the more civil-military relations debate.
Yeah, just a final point about the circular relationship. So role conception allows us to understand what determines the military's reactions to political demands, but it also allows us to assess changes on how the military reacts to those political demands in the future. So role conception are there, and they're not there in the beginning, they develop over time. But with the experience, with the operational experience, those role conceptions might change as well. So what the military considers as appropriate as a mission changes as well with the experience of military operations. And we wanted to provide a tool to understand this circular relationship.
Yeah, I think it's a very useful tool and formulation. I'm sure it'll be applied to other case studies. I mean, we've had a discourse the past month in the UK, perhaps longer, of the UK military involved in addressing the gaps, I suppose, in the pandemic response and how that influences civil military relations. A case study that could use your concepts. And okay, I just wanted to end by getting a general sense of your experience of taking an idea from the project stage through to guest editing a special issue, and what tips you might have for colleagues who might be thinking of a similar kind of project.
Perhaps I can start, and Nicole and Christoph can add. So I think the sort of maybe the main point is really that to have an idea about an interesting idea that where one can adopt different perspectives, and because that's really how it started. As Christoph mentioned at the beginning, it started from a pretty informal conversation, and then it just spiraled off, and sort of we let it mature throughout time, right? We wrote several iterations, and we revised the concept before submitting it to the European Journal of International Security, where we were accepted. And so I think just let time mature the idea, let time sort of allow the project to mature and develop. Then I think that the other thing that really worked very well for us was it might be daunting to work as three co-editors, but I have to say it has been such a pleasure to work with Christoph and Nicole, because we just have a similar idea of how to work, and we have also had some we may not always agree, but we always have a very open communication, which I think has really helped us develop this. And then I would add to this, the open conversation and direct dialogue and communication is also something that has helped us a lot in communicating with the contributors and contributing authors. And maybe the first thing we did after you know, sort of after the news, the great news that we were accepted, that the EJIS was interested in our special issue, was to organize an authors workshop for a first round of comments and feedback. So that's also something that I would strongly recommend, because that really provided a platform not only to listen to first drafts and, you know, put some pressure so that people could actually get some first drafts down on paper, but also for us, it was extremely useful to develop our concept and our idea. I think I was just looking through the notes of this authors workshop that we had last January, and it's tremendous the progress we made in our own thinking, in understanding how we are contributing to the debate. So I think the authors workshop and this continuous dialogue and conversation, both among us and with the contributing authors, has been of tremendous help and support.
I think something that was very important in that process of letting the project, the special issue, mature, that Chiara described, was that we had not only a topic, but we asked questions to the authors. That's something that they told us afterwards, that it has been very helpful and useful for them, so that they needed to respond to something. It was not write about that topic or describe any relation or phenomenon, but they had to answer to certain questions. And that makes, I guess, in the end, the difference between a special issue and just any collection of papers.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's a great special issue. We're really pleased with it, and I hope readers will check it out. And I believe we are possibly presenting at the BISA conference later this year, where we can discuss these issues further. But for now, thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you, bye.